Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to another edition of Scoreboard here on ACTN. It's always a pleasure every Tuesday evening to be in your company where we discuss sports. Let me take this opportunity to say hi to all the viewers and supporters of this program, and we really appreciate you all. My co-host, as I said last week, is back, and it's always a pleasure to introduce Maria Thomas. Maria, it's a pleasure, and welcome back again.
Thank you. Great to be here.
You will have the honors to introduce our guest for tonight and the topic that we're going to be discussing.
All right, so very exciting show that we have tonight. We have Dr. Delia Jordan Brown, and she is a World Rugby player welfare trainer, a World Rugby medic, and she is also a former national player for Trinidad and Tobago. So Delia, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. Could you before we get into all the questions that we want to ask, could you just give us and the viewers a brief, history about yourself?
Okay, so I started playing rugby, I think it's 2006, yes. 2006 I started playing rugby, and soon I made it to the national team. Rugby has been a huge part of my life. It has influenced a lot of areas. I wouldn't have traveled and seen as much as the world as I have without rugby. So rugby is near and dear to my heart. When I started playing, I also started med school at the time. Initially, I wasn't sure I was going to make the two work, but when you want something to work, you make it work. So while in the medical aspect, I went, you can say, a little far off from the sporting field because I'm a qualified obstetrician and gynecologist. I still wanted to have some kind of impact in rugby even after I stopped playing. So I became part of World Rugby's Educators and Trainers, where I teach or put on courses for first aid in rugby in Trinidad and in the region as well. So it's part of preparing not just medical professionals, but the everyday person. So it could be supporters on the side, parents who are involved in rugby, coaches, referees. We make them aware of the basic first aid methods that you can use on the field to assist in case of an incident. So I became one of the trainers, we call them in World Rugby, for first aid. And that progressed into, when you do one thing, they're like, oh, try something else. So then they asked me if I would be willing to be one of the pitside medics. And I was like, why not? There's always, now they've made it mandatory that we always have a doctor on side, a match day doctor on side. So you're going to have someone there if you have any issues in terms of specific, like if there are any sport injuries that I may not be versed in. So you always have that support with you. But for the basic pitch side injuries, you can go, I would go on, run on. It was a very good experience because I've worked for some of the RAN tournaments. RAN is Rugby Americas North, which is our region in World Rugby. So I've worked for some of the tournaments, and it was a great experience. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Somebody once said on a program we did on rugby, I don't know if it's you, Maria, or one of the guests, that once you get into rugby, you can't give it up.
Yeah.
And I listen to you now, I can see where because you went into the medic field and still you had that bug.
Yeah.
So
I always wanted to come back. It's almost like a snowball effect. Like you start with one thing and then you end up with another. And then next thing you know, I'm on a bunch of committees and I'm like, how did I reach here?
Yeah. But you don't play at all again, right?
No, I don't.
Okay.
My plan for 2020 was to probably start back, a little club rugby. But we all know what happened in 2020.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right, we definitely do.
Yeah.
Which is a great segue into our topic,
yes.
which is safe return to play.
Yeah.
I know that players all over the world, and especially in Trinidad and Tobago, can't wait to start playing rugby again, and it feels like nothing is happening at all.
Yeah.
But that may be the case for playing on the field, but a lot of stuff is happening in the background, and you are actually working on a document that continues to fluctuate and change and morph as necessary with the situation. Can you tell us what is World Rugby and Rugby Americas North doing to work towards having an environment where returning to play will be safe?
Okay. So World Rugby decided that each region, they should have a player welfare working group, which is basically geared towards safe return to play. right? The thing with the COVID-19 virus and everything that's been happening, it's very dynamic. Things keep shifting month by month, even week by week, and guidelines may change, the scenario may change. Now we have a vaccine where when we started this working group, there was no vaccine. We didn't even have a proper timeline for a vaccine as yet. So the one thing that we have to keep in mind with this is that this is a very dynamic and changing situation. So what we wanted to focus on were two aspects of safety. So safety in terms of the player themselves when they're returning to play, that we can reduce injuries, because a lot of us have, yes, it's COVID-19, but some people, when they refer to the COVID-19, they're referring to the 19 pounds they put on during the pandemic. Yeah. So, and some of us as players, because we're not all professional athletes or play at the elite level. The majority of Trinidad and Tobago, the players are at the community level and at the club level, and not everyone, between the pressures of the pandemic and all the issues, not everyone has kept up with their strength and conditioning programs and routines.
That is true.
Yes. So World Rugby developed a program called Activate, which it's a 4 to 8 week program, which helps get you back in that condition to go towards contact rugby. They've done the test and it's been proven to reduce injuries by 25 to 40% and concussions by 29 to 60%. So it's proven, tried and true and proven. Yeah, it's a program that you can access online, so coaches can access it online, even players themselves. It's very detailed in terms of they have videos that you can follow, and it's very set, and it's also set in terms of age groups. So they have adults, they have under 15, 16 to 18. So it's very detailed, and it's working. They've seen it from not just in our region, but different regions across the world. The Activate program has been very successful.
I really like that there's a focus on that getting yourself into a fit state, that it's safe for you to play. There's so much focus on, COVID-19, which is, of course, our major barrier right now. But I think that we need to avoid neglecting that we have to be prepared to return to play. We can't just wait for, the government to say, hey, borders are open, restrictions are lifted. If I was to go and play a match right now, I'm not sure. I would be coming to see you for sure. I would definitely come to see you very soon.
Yeah. So along with the Activate program, we also needed to focus on decreasing the risk of transmission when we reach that stage that we can have tournaments and games, not just locally, but regionally as well. So we worked along World Rugby, because World Rugby themselves, World Rugby has really, really good online resources.
Okay.
So they created 2 COVID-19 online guidelines where they focus for coaches and players and also for administrators, for the persons putting on tournaments that they can follow and run. And the working group, we adapted some of those guidelines and adapted it to our region, and we worked on a protocol that we can go forward with for regional tournaments.
Have these programs been taken to the Ministry of Sports in response to you all getting a meeting to get the sport back going?
Currently, not as yet.
Okay.
Mainly, I think because we're still in the progress of finalizing. Well, it's been finalized mainly, but we haven't reached the stage yet of going to, say, the Ministry of Sports and saying this is what we can do. We're not necessarily ready to do contact, but we can get into other things to maintain fitness, especially for our national teams. We're not there yet, but that is the plan. The plan is to get to the point where once permitted, because we have to keep in mind that, yes, we want to play rugby, we want to get out. We're tired of being home and on Zoom classes and working out in our living rooms. Yes, we want to go out and do things, but we have to keep in mind that the guidelines are always related to where you are. So one of the fine print that World Rugby puts out there and what RAN put there is that all these guidelines and protocols are dependent to your country and their health protocols, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we're not creating a transmission hub for the virus.
But they had opened up for national teams, so the rugby has no national teams in training right now.
No, we don't, as far as I know.
So I looked over the working document that you have participated in, and I found it really comprehensive and almost like a step-by-step list.
Yes, it is.
So it really fits in with probably the highest levels that you could expect for restrictions in a country. Can you tell us some of those steps and some of those procedures, elements that would be put in place to make sure that return to play is safe?
Right. So the good thing about the document is that you can adopt it to a tournament here, or if not, just a club match right here, and you can adopt it to a regional tournament. So you can use it for both, right? The first part that you would want to focus on is what the players themselves have to do, and then we also focused on what administrators, the ones putting on the tournament, would have to do. So in terms of the players themselves, just basic, they call them the rules of engagement in a way, where you focus on making sure that the players are well educated on the COVID-19 virus, the risk, how it's transmitted, those kind of things. You want to make sure that they understand about social distancing. They understand that when you come to a club, there's no you can't use the communal showers. They're advising you that you shower at home. So you come play a game and you leave. Rugby is a very fraternal sport. We love, after a game, you sit down with your opponents, you have a drink, and you talk about the game. You give a little old talk here and there. Unfortunately, we're not advising that just yet. Okay. Something as simple
but
as...
that's the best part of rugby.
Yeah.
The after game.
The third half?
Yes, the third half, yes. We're also not advising carpooling, because all that is part of the sport, especially if we have a game in San Fernando in South, and we have a team from up north. You would either get a maxi or you'll call up your friend, hey, any room in your car? Unfortunately, we're not advising those things because it would increase the risk of transmission. So we also, just as you would go to, say, the hospital or to any institution, and they would ask you, do you have any cough, cold, flu-like symptoms, loss of smell? Those things with the education, we're hoping that there's a clear responsibility to know that if I have these things, I need to advise my coach, tell my coach, and then they can advise them, okay, well, contact this person, this health institution, just as the government protocols or the health Ministry of Health protocols are there, and don't show up to the game. And then after you're actually sick, then you created this transmission hub, for lack of a better word. Yeah, so we focusing on the player's responsibility towards reducing the spread of the virus. In terms of the game itself, so say we're going to have a tournament here in Trinidad, a regional tournament. So we need to think about initially, if we want teams to come in, how do we incorporate our local health guidelines along with our rugby guidelines to make it a successful tournament? So we have to consider the quarantine days. So say, well, in Trinidad, our quarantine is a 14-day period, regardless, whether it's home or in a government facility, whereas in other Caribbean countries, it may be less. I think if you have a negative test 3 days before, and then you repeat one on arrival, and within 5 days, once it's negative, you can move about as normal. So a country like that may be more, ideal to have a tournament maybe there than here, because when you have to consider the cost of a team coming in and spending 14 days there. So all these things we have to consider when we're putting on these tournaments. So that's one thing, to the quarantine time period and whether we are taking the test and the type of test, whether we're doing a PCR test, which is a more accurate test, or antibody test, which is not necessary, which is not as accurate as the PCR test. So all those things we put in detail into the document itself. So we've decided on a venue, a country, and quarantine period. So then when they're going through the airport, how do they go through? Are they going to go through with everybody else and bounce up this one and collect this from their friend in Barbados who coming to drop or something? So all these things we need to think about with the teams and all the players coming in. right? Because we want to keep them, because I keep saying like a bubble,
Yeah.
as much as a bubble as possible as we can. So, if possible, if you can liaise so that the check-in process is as streamlined as possible, so their contact with persons
It's less,
outside
yeah.
of their team is minimal, would be ideal. So that's one thing. So the transport from the airport to the hotel and from hotel to the training venues and the match venues, we need to make sure that, okay, so each team would have their own bus, and only this team travels with this driver and this bus. So things like that, which can, if you think about it, be a lot more costly, because when you're putting on a tournament, we all know how this works. So you'll be like, Trinidad is going on this team. Oh, they finished, but go pick up Guyana now. Guyana, right?
Yeah,
They're ready.
yeah.
Yeah.
So things like that we would
And
usually
there's no
do.
sanitation between.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it could come up to be a bit more costly, but in terms of if you want to have games returning and safe play, we have to put these things into effect to ensure that our tournament runs smoothly, and then we don't end up with something like one person comes down positive,
Yeah.
and then when you do the contact tracing, they have like 20 contacts who probably have another 20 contacts, yeah, and so it goes.
But
So,
I've listened to all what you've said just now, right? But are we in Trinidad, are we talking rugby?
yes.
Do we have what it takes to start rugby or even entertain the idea of staging a tournament? Why I said this is because most of the grounds that the rugby is played on is an open field. There's no bar, there's no toilet, there's no drinking water, there's absolutely nothing, right?
All of a sudden, those things become.
We will take it now to maybe the stadium, but there's no guarantee that in the stadium there's water, right? There's no guarantee that in the stadium the toilets are functioning, right? So are we in a position to even entertain the idea of starting rugby on the whole?
Honestly, in terms of a tournament, I don't think we're there yet. But and even for contact play, I personally don't think we should start contact just yet. But we can still train. We can do things outside of contact in the same things I was talking about for the strength and conditioning. Because you don't want, when things get better and they say, okay, contact training, we're now starting, because a lot of other countries are getting prepared to have tournaments, and they're aiming to, I believe, World Rugby is prepared to start back their 7th series at the end of this year. We won't be involved in that 7th series, but there would be regional tournaments that would be coming up.
Okay, hold that thought for a minute. We need to take a break, right? When we come back, we'll continue, and I want you to give some advice as to what the athletes can do in the meantime to maintain their fitness and their strength and, let's say, their sanity too, right? Because we'll be right back after the short break.
Hi, I'm Dr. Delia Jordan Brown, a World Rugby medic and trainer, as well as a qualified obstetrician and gynecologist. You're viewing Scoreboard, and this is ACTN.
You're watching ACTN, The Voice. Connect with ACTN The Voice on Facebook or Instagram at ACTN The Voice.
ACTN The Voice, your family-friendly station.
Welcome back, viewers. Welcome back to Scoreboard, and we are discussing tonight the safe return to play in the sport of rugby, and our guest is Dr. Delia Jordan Brown. As you were saying before the break, you were discussing.
Return to play.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. If we are ready, and
Right.
You know, how capable we are right now.
So as I said before, I don't think we're ready for tournaments, but we can start back training, I believe, even at the club level as well as nationals.
Yeah, but training now,
Right, and what we can do.
you're going to be coming together, right?
Right.
And you're going to be in contact.
Right. No,
Right?
that's it. We can train, but we don't have to do contact training
Okay,
to
all
begin.
right.
Right? We can start non-contact training. You can meet. The good thing about rugby is that it's in the open air, so it's not in an indoor area that we have to train. So you could be out in the savannah or wherever your training pitch is, and we advise that we do it in small groups, 10 or less. So you can have, and whatever you're doing, you can have. You can spread it out. So say you may have somebody running one drill here, maybe sprints on one side. You can have people doing different body exercising on the other. If you have equipment, if you're using any kind of weight equipment, we advise that you have, just like the gym, you sanitize in between each new person. You could even do it like a circuit. So 10 people working, you go here, and then as you move along to each different thing, that's one thing that we would advise. So smaller groups of working persons. You can have Blackboard sessions online with Zoom where you can discuss plays or games or plans for your club or for in what we're more concerned with is with the national team and getting the national team ready in terms of if there's a tournament that RAN would like to put on for the national members. You can have online meetings with them to discuss basically training programs that they can do on their own as well. Yeah. Yes, I know it's difficult. For me personally, motivation to train alone at home is very, very low.
Well, I was just going to ask a question based on you being a former athlete and Maria, a current athlete. Training, and not playing. How do you keep going? Because do you get frustrated at times and say, I will skip training today because it's no match coming up next week?
Yeah, well, that is one of the, that would be one, and I don't think that's just related to rugby alone. I think
No, yeah, all sports,
yeah.
all sports.
But not just all sports, to the pandemic on the whole,
Yeah.
doing a lot of things without knowing when is the end line,
Yeah.
what am I working
Yeah,
towards.
so you might be able to, you might want to skip today and
Yeah.
skip tomorrow because, yeah.
Definitely. So I think that's where we have to get innovative and get different. So even though we may not have an end line or goal in terms of we're working towards this tournament in July, I think as coaches, we need coaches need to be innovative in terms of getting little motivating factors. So I don't know if you want to do a competition between your players, saying, okay, we're doing this, and we want to get to this fitness level to see if by June, if we can all run 9 or 10 on a beep test, or different things. So you have to know what motivates you, as well as your coach has to figure out ways to motivate their players to keep on track.
Do you think that that's a necessary step if teams are going to be prepared to return to play in a tournament style? Like, what do you think, how necessary is that for teams to be prepared? Could they wait and say a month before they find out about a tournament, think, all right, where are our best players? Can we put together a team? Or is this something that national teams have to consider if they want to have players prepared to play?
Definitely. National teams should definitely consider this because I don't want to say usually, but a lot of times we go fly by night, like I just go as it goes. You know, they say trainees were very laid back, you know, we take it as it goes. But in a case like this, if you want to have the ideal performance of your players, you don't want to go out and have a subpar performance, you should start from beforehand because a month before a tournament is nowhere near enough to get a team properly ready and in the ideal fitness and condition to
But
compete.
that's the normal training in all sports, yeah? 2 weeks, 3 weeks before.
Yes, and then you're pulling together, and then you're upset with the results. But then your performance there, it doesn't start the week before. It's months. All the people that are, as they say, the greats, the goats of their sports, they're training before training starts.
Definitely. Now, you did mention that World Rugby has really good resources online. What about the components where individual athletes, coaches, administrators, whoever, what sort of courses can they take online through World Rugby Passport?
So in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, they have 2 courses specifically for it, where they educate on what the COVID-19 virus is, transmission, risk of steps to reduce risk of transmission, as well as the guidelines to compete throughout the pandemic, as I said, for coaches and players, as well as for administrators. There's also, well, I'm focused more for the player welfare one, so I wouldn't be able to give you much information as on the strength and conditioning and for coaches and referees, but they have programs for each. In terms of the player welfare, there is, as I said, the First Aid and Rugby online resource. The thing with these online programs and courses that we have, there's a online as well as a practical aspect. And unfortunately, because of the COVID-19, we have been unable to have any courses because you can't complete the course without doing the practical aspects. Yes, you can read about doing CPR, but you have to practice it and know the hand placement is right, the depth is right, the rate of compressions are right, all those little things. Otherwise, you may be doing more harm than good. Oh, I read a course online, come move. Let me go. And you're doing more harm than good. So, as much as the online courses, some of the online courses are well and very informative, we have to have a practical aspect, and we can't have any until the healthcare protocols allow us to. Yeah? And the thing with CPR course is it doesn't allow for a lot of social distancing. Yeah?
In the sport of rugby, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't recall, like, although it's such a physical sport, I can't recall deaths, anybody dying in the sport of rugby, or any major injury, right? What do you think is the cause for that?
So,
because a lot of people look at rugby and they find it's so, I don't want to be, and when you look at rugby and you compare it to the American football, I mean, like chalk and cheese, right? But what do you think, is?
Honestly, I believe World Rugby has put a lot of focus on player welfare over the last few years, especially from when I started in 2006 to now. It has snowballed in terms of how much they've put into and how much focus they've put into player welfare.
You never had any injury in your...
I've had injuries, but more like soft tissue, bone injuries. I broke a clavicle, dislocated a thumb. But I'm probably not helping our cause here in terms of it's not that bad.
Yeah.
But I have seen players have concussions, and the difference in what we did when I started playing and what we do now, it's such a drastic change. I remember we weren't that bad. We would tell them, no, don't drink anything, stay awake, don't go to sleep, somebody will drop you home, that kind of thing. But at that point in time, how we would recognize a concussion, we would only know if the player themselves had a very obvious symptom or sign of a concussion, right? Like they either lost consciousness or they got up and they came to you, what are we doing? Why are we here? I've seen that happen. I've seen somebody in the middle of the game just walking in the next direction and it's like, what's going on here? Are we playing a game? Yeah? But a concussion could be as simple as you got a hit to the head and you have a severe headache, if you understand what I mean. Yeah? So a lot of people, their understanding of a concussion then and now and how we react to it and what we do has changed and changed for the better. So we have, so World Rugby in the whole has pushed this player welfare and putting the player first. As much as we want to play rugby, as much as we want to win, if it's not safe for a player to continue, they have to be removed. And when you're removed, that's not it, right? It's not that you're removed and next week we see you on the field against the next team. They have set out strict guidelines in terms of gradual return to play after concussion, which consists of rest. You should rest for a minimum of 24 hours, and that's for adults. For children, because they found that the effects of a concussion is way worse for children and young adults. Their rest period is way longer. Could be anywhere from a week to 2 weeks. And your rest period can be extended if you still have symptoms. So if you have symptoms of rest, you shouldn't be progressing to another stage of the recovery process. So the recovery process, as I said, starts off with rest, and then from rest you would go to your regular activities. So you'd be able, because at rest, sorry, let me go back. At rest, you don't do anything. You basically lie down in a darkened room. You're not reading, you're not scrolling through Facebook or IG, you're not updating your Twitter, getting a load of the latest Twitter bacchanal.
That is if somebody there looking over you.
Well, that's the thing.
So you have to be disciplined enough
you have
to
to
know
be
that if you're home,
disciplined,
you know, what, you know.
Yeah, and you have to be advised as well, because I think if people understand the long-term effects of concussion, which we don't even fully understand, I think people would be more willing to follow the guidelines. Because everybody wants to play. Everybody wants to get back out. And the thing with concussion is you feel like you're fine, yeah? Sometimes these symptoms aren't that bad that, no, it's fine, I'm good. It's not an issue. The player themselves feels that way. So sometimes it is difficult to get them to follow the guidelines. Yeah.
So that's why at every rugby game there is a medic.
We're trying to ensure that.
Oh, so that's not happening right now?
Not necessarily at the club level,
Right.
but definitely at the
international tournament
level,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Definitely at the
Yeah,
tournament
yeah,
level.
yeah.
But we need to get there at the club level. We
So
have
what advice would you give, you know, to like clubs, you know, normal games, like if something like that happens, what's the first thing you do? Because you see somebody in a clash and they fall down, yeah. I mean, you studying concussion, what sort of advice, you know, you will give to the people who are wrong? Because, you know, once you fall down there's a whole group of people wrong and everybody giving advice, do this, do that, you know. What would you advise them to do?
So the first thing we say is recognize and remove, all right? So some of the signs and symptoms that you would look out for concussion would be, because loss of consciousness is not a number one sign. Less than 10% of persons who have a concussion would lose consciousness. So that is not the only sign to look out for. So generally you'd look for headache, they may be confused, maybe unaware of where they are, disoriented, they may have nausea or vomiting, they may be dizzy, loss of balance, so they get up and as soon as they get up, they stumble forward. Yeah, that's one of the signs that we could look for as well. If you see any of those worrying signs and suspect a concussion, because we're not talking about the obvious. When something drastic happens, that makes everybody stop and go, more than likely, that is a player that you need to remove one time. Yeah? For the suspected cases, we then pull them to the side and we do what we call the sport concussion assessment tool. Right? There are different ones, but we do the SCAT-3. In order to do the SCAT-3, you should have a baseline of the player, because the SCAT-3 is a test that checks different areas of your cognition. So it will check balance, it will check memory, short and long-term memory, your orientation, whether you know where you are, you know who you are, all those things, the time of day. Those are the kind of questions you get asked, right? But in terms of when you're checking the memory with the SCAT-3, I can't remember the exact question, but there's like a math question in terms of subtract backwards by 7 or something.
Reciting different numbers.
Right, numbers and those kind of stuff.
I remember doing it and being terrified that I was going to be like to even get on the field. It's like my baseline might not be that high.
Right, and this is your baseline where you're not under any pressure. You come into probably a doctor's office, or you come into your physio and they're doing it. And if, say, I am terrible at math, yeah, my baseline may be horrible. But if I never had a doctor on the game day with a player who just running, out of breath, tired, may not have a concussion, may be very terrible at math, and there's no baseline to compare with, you're going to diagnose a player with a concussion and give them at a minimum 6-day gradual return to play that wasn't necessary. So it's ideal to have a baseline. It's also ideal because some of the questions that they ask are Maddox questions. If I'm not connected to the team, I've never met this player, I don't know anything about the team or the player, and I asked a question, because this tests short and long-term memory. I asked a question, who did you play last week? And they tell me, we played a team from South. I'd be like, okay. And but I have no clue. And not every team has a physio or someone with them at that point in time, because especially at the club level, sometimes it's when because because you want to play, you want to keep the game going. You might be short, and you'll be like, come and play. And you have like a bare 15 coming to play a game to get it done. Because that's what we do in rugby. Yeah? We get it done, we want to play, we want to keep the game going. So there's no physio, there's probably a sub running ice. Right? So as the person there, you may not have at that point in time something to compare to make sure and assess this player correctly. So one of the things that we can, I think as a union, at the start of our games, the start of the year, is you can send out to clubs and see if you can get somebody to do a baseline SCAT-3, so there's something to compare to in instances like that, so we can better diagnose a concussion.
What about moving the player?
Right. So moving a player depends on the type of injury they had.
Yeah, but remember now, there's no qualified person there, right?
Right.
So you don't know what kind of injury this person has. Right? So movement is important.
Movement is important, yes. So we generally advise that if a player lost consciousness and there's a head injury, I think most people know now, I think from just TV and whatnot, not to move people. I think that has become like based on just general knowledge and from watching TV and the internet. I think most persons have the idea in their head, don't move them, yeah? Because if you move them, it could cause injury, further injury to the player. So we generally advise, if the player, because sometimes players move on their own and they get up. That's actually a good sign, because it's unlikely that they have a severe head injury or neck injury, because what we're worried about is head and neck injuries and affecting spine, the spine. So if the player is moving on their own, sometimes they can move, they're moving on their own and you don't want them to move. So if you're worried, I would advise somebody to tell them, don't move, just lie down still and tell us what's happening from there. The first thing that you can ask, if they're conscious and awake and aware, you can ask them, do you have pain anywhere? Right? And if they tell you they have pain in their head or neck, that's the point where you tell them, don't move.
Don't move,
Yeah? Okay. There is a move that if you are qualified to do, I would advise, but if you're not, I would not advise you do it. It's something called manual inline stabilization, or the acronym is MILS, where you basically stabilize the head and neck. But if you do it the wrong way, it would be causing more harm. So unless you're qualified to do it, I would not advise someone to do it. All right? So for the person, so in an instance where you see something that looks suspicious, you go up to the player, they have pain in their head and neck, I would just advise that you tell them, lie still, move as little as possible, and call for help. Yeah?
Well said. We're going to take our final break. When we come back, we will continue our discussion. We're going to be right back after this short break.
Hi, I'm Dr. Delia Jordan Brown, a World Rugby medic and trainer, as well as a qualified obstetrician and gynecologist. You're viewing Scoreboard, and this is ACTN.
But you break my foot. And you say, I break your foot, but you come with your foot so.
Football, at the end of the day, as we say, FIFA is the governing body. But football belongs to the people.
You're doing that because you think you could.
Yeah, the referee just passed and said, tell you, just fall along the box.
Hey everybody, welcome to Field of Dreams on ACTN.
Welcome back. You're watching Scoreboard, and we are here with Dr. Delia Jordan Brown. We are speaking about rugby, safe return to play, and what the rugby community can do to help facilitate that happening. Delia, we've had a great conversation so far. I'm not sure if everyone was aware that so much goes on behind the scenes to ensure player welfare. What are some of the things that people who want to step up into some of these positions can do?
So, as I stated before, I have worked as a pitchside medic for Trinidad and Tobago as well as for RAN, for tournaments. And one of the criteria that World Rugby and RAN has put in place is that all their medics, all their physios, all their any healthcare professional that's working alongside a team, that they have what we call a level 2, which is called a level 2, which is immediate care in rugby, which is actually the step up from the first aid in rugby that I teach for generally anyone to be a pitchside medic. the immediate care in rugby is geared towards physios, athletic trainers, doctors. So unfortunately, this is not for the supporters and the coaches and the persons on the side. This one is geared towards healthcare professionals, and it's so that everyone on the field that goes onto the pitch as a medic is on the same page, right? Because we're not saying that your physio degree is not good enough or that your doctor's degree is not good enough. We're not saying that you're not great at what you do. We're just saying that sometimes there are little variations in how we do things. And if, God forbid, we have some kind of catastrophic injury or a head injury, and more than one person runs on the field to assist, which usually happens, everyone is on the same page. So that's the aim of the World Rugby courses. It's so that all the medical professionals on the pitch knows what to do and will do the same thing. So it makes communication easier, it makes the runnings of things smoother, and it improves the care that the player will get. So in order to do the immediate care in rugby, just as the first aid in rugby course, there is an online and a practical, right? I know some of our local persons have done the online, but so far I'm the only person in Trinidad who's done both the online and the practical. Okay. We were working towards getting a course run either here or in the Caribbean to get more persons from Trinidad accredited. But of course, due to COVID, there's been some setbacks. I'm really, really hoping that in the future we can get that, because we definitely need more people on board. Yeah, especially more people who, but this is their specialty. This is what they do. You know, they would be able to go very far in terms of the moving with teams, even working with RAN or World Rugby. You never know where this could take you. Yeah. You know, as I said before, I started off just learning the first aid course. I wasn't even sure what I went for. I thought I was going to do a first aid course, like as in be a participant. I didn't even realize until I reached that I was going to, they were teaching me to put on the course to teach people and get people aware of first aid in rugby. So I would advise that anybody willing, you can contact the TTRFU. If you have my contact details, well, rugby people would most rugby people would have my contact details. If you do, let me know, because I really would like to get more people involved.
So you can do the training and everything?
So it's funny because that's part of so there are different levels in terms of trainers. There are trainers and educators. So I'm working towards being an educator in World Rugby, and part of it is to put on one of the higher level courses. Okay. So it would be a win-win for all of us. Yes. Yeah. So I can help put on the course as well as getting persons here accredited with the level course. Okay.
And I've taken your first aid course. It was excellent. The online components are a prerequisite, but it's definitely different when you're actually working with people. You have an instructor. You were really observant and paid attention to all of the small details. I know that I'm usually kind of hesitant, thinking someone else will be better qualified to do things, but I was in situations where, because I took your course and it was so good, I was like, oh, look at me in this position now, because I knew what to do.
So that's, you put on a course for only rugby people
anyone who's interested. It doesn't have to be rugby, because yes, it's first aid in rugby, but it's first aid. Yeah. It's just more geared towards rugby situations, but you can adapt that to anything. You can adapt that to football, because some of these situations that would happen in rugby can happen in any contact sport. I did a course in Barbados, and I had, under the Olympic Committee as well, rugby hosted it, but the Olympic Committee assisted, as well as in St. Lucia, and I had persons from other sporting divisions and not just rugby.
Now, I'm interested that you mentioned the higher level. So there's the first aid that anyone can do, spectators, athletes, coaches. I mean, I'm kind of think everyone should do it, because it boosts our community and our level of competence and understanding. But that next level, you said more for physiotherapists, medical professionals. I just want to highlight that and say, you know, do you think we have enough people in the community who would realize that this is somewhere that they can move forward with their career or open doors? And as far as that course happening, do you think that that's something that will happen in Trinidad and Tobago, say this year or in the near future?
I would really, if I can, because I would really like that to happen this year. I actually was speaking to one of the coaches I must say, he's very big on pushing the first aid and getting all his coaches, for especially at the school league, to take the first aid course, and I really commend him about that. I was telling him once we've reached a level where we can do things like that, like especially if the vaccine starts rolling in and we're getting people vaccinated, our numbers are low, and healthcare guidelines and protocols allow, I am more than willing to start back, and even to see if we can help organize a course for the level 2. The thing with the level 2 is, and what I urge people is, when and why, I'm not excluding anybody. Let me put that out there. Anybody who's willing to do it, whether they're rugby affiliated or not, are more than welcome to do the level 2. But what I do want is that whoever comes and is willing to do it, that they understand that, because as I said, you need to, in order to travel with the team, or to be able, let me not say travel with the team, but in order to be able to run on pit side at any RAN tournament or World Rugby tournament, you have to have this level 2 course.
Okay.
So I would love that the persons who take this course are willing then, I took this course and now I could just add something nice on my CV. I want these people also to be willing to devote their time towards it and towards these sports. Because we don't want to have 4 or 5 more people accredited, and then when it's time to travel, we have nobody to pull, or nobody willing. Yeah. We really would like that the people coming forward are, and I know there are a lot of people. I know there are people waiting when we're having a course, because they want to be a part. They're already a part of rugby. They're already a part of physio and a part of player welfare, and they just need that one thing to be able to continue along. But we need more. We need options. We need people, and it's not a matter of. Sometimes we have this feeling like, this person might take my spot, or, the more, trust me, the more the better. If, even if you're the person that travels with the team all the time, or does this with the team all the time, and you're at this level and you're already qualified, if you bring a junior person along, they'll be like, oh, well, we have her, maybe you never know, they may have something even bigger or better for you along the line. So
but some of us are giving up that, that comfort and style, and we ain't doing that.
What do you think needs to be done to facilitate having this framework implemented in local tournaments, local games, club and community?
Well, as I said, if the more people we have accredited, the easier that becomes. Because when you have a tournament, you have a pool to pull from. So if, as it stands, if they're having a tournament next week and I can't make, or say we have 2 people, someone else can't make the tournament, then you're stuck with nobody, basically, yeah? Or you help around. You maybe help for ransom, for lack of a better word, but I can't do this today. You'll need to work around me, if you understand if you get in my gist.
Yes.
So the more people that we get involved, the more options you have in terms of, and more persons that you have available that you can pull from. So you have a bigger pool to pull from. And when we have that bigger pool, it can help with the smooth runnings of the tournament. Yeah. So you can have, and we can adopt the same style that RAN and World Rugby adopts for their tournaments. So you can have a match day official, a match day doctor, and they're the ones in charge of their team. So the match day doctor is in charge of the team of medics that are running on pit side, and this could be separate, and this is usually separate and apart from the team's physios. Yeah, so they have match day doctors at work, and you can set up a tent, a medic tent, where even if the physios run into any issues, they can come to you at the medic tent and powwow or talk about this injury and get advice or even some equipment. Yeah, we can ensure that the match, when you have a match day doctor, you can ensure that all the protocols are there. You have an ambulance there, and the ambulance is well equipped. It has a spinal board. It has a AED, which is the defibrillator, because, as I said, you never know what can happen.
So you are saying that all these things should be at every rugby game?
Ideally, yes, it should. But if we're being practical, it's not. It's not. For the setting that we're at, it's not there yet. Yeah, we have to separate community rugby and elite level or tournament rugby, right? But even at the community level, even if you don't have an ambulance, if you have somebody that understands how it should run,
Yeah,
they will
yeah.
have I can't remember the exact word now, but you'd have a plan, an emergency action plan,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You'd have an emergency action plan. So say we're having a tournament in the Savannah. Port of Spain General is right around the corner, right? So you know that you could call beforehand to say you're having a sevens tournament that day. Nothing is wrong with calling the hospital beforehand and saying, listen, we may have injuries from a rugby tournament with
Yeah,
so and
yeah.
so. There may be a possibility that you may get persons coming in for this, right? You're gonna decide if you're gonna have an ambulance or not, or if it's possible to have an ambulance. If not, you can set aside someone who will, for injuries where players can be transported
Yeah,
and
yeah.
doesn't need an ambulance to call. This person, if there's an injury, you're set aside, we'll call you, and you will be the one to transport persons from the field to the hospital. You can set up so that your medic tent or the person in charge for because you may not even have a tent. You may just have a person there that day at the community level who's running everything. So everybody knows, so at the start of the tournament, when they're introducing and they're saying the rules and whatnot, you let everybody know this is the person, the medic. I'll be in the fluorescent green medic vest. So you all can come to me if any issues. You could probably give the physios your number because you might have your phone on you to call me
Yeah,
if there's anything or there's any injuries that I may be able to assist with. So yes, you may not be able to do it at the level of a tournament, but you can put an emergency action plan in place to decrease, if injuries do occur, to decrease any it being from a minor injury to a catastrophic injury.
But you think that in the short term, this should be done, right? But are you saying that long term, these are things that should be implemented in the sport of rugby?
Definitely.
So everybody should have an idea of treating some sort of injury and some place where, the transportation and everything. Because in boxing, a boxing match cannot start unless an ambulance is not present. It cannot start. So because of the same, head injuries that they talk about. So I don't know. I don't know how much more time we have, but is there anything that, I don't know if Maria have any more questions, but if there's anything that you feel that is important for the rugby fraternity to be aware of, you can share that with us.
I think it's what I said in this last segment here in terms of persons willing to come forward and be level 2 accredited. I'm more than once we put things in place and we're running a course. I hope that that anyone interested comes forward. In the event that we do run a course, we will advertise and get the word out there far and wide. And I'm more than willing to assist as much people as we can on that day, because the more people that we get accredited and involved, the better. I'm really set on having that done as soon as is possible.
And how long is the duration for the course?
Usually, because the level 2 is more in depth, usually it's a weekend. Well, not a weekend, but a 2-day course. It usually happens on the weekend because people are working.
And the question most, if not all Trinidadians is asked, is it free or do you have to pay?
Well, I can't say that just
because you know Trinidadians, that's what they're going to ask. Yeah.
Ideally, I think it should be free, but it's all dependent on the cost of putting on.
Yeah, because you have to get a venue and
it's nice to always have refreshments available for people, all those nice little things. And as I said, we don't know the structure in which we would be having it. Because we're not 100% what a post-COVID, if there will even be like a post-COVID era. Like we're not sure. We're not sure how long, even with the vaccinations, it would take for us to go back resembling what we used to know as normal before.
Because today I read something that they said some people who are still taking the vaccine are still getting it, so we don't know what is taking place or how long. But as you said, some parts of rugby could be implemented.
Yes.
Right? The actual physical playing, we can't do that, but there are things that, we can do.
Yes.
So you wouldn't be bored or put on extra weight or things like that.
Well, you made
Like
some
that.
important points. Can you recap what athletes can do right now and
Okay.
the Activate?
Right. So in terms of returning to play, we can, as athletes, we can do our own strength and conditioning. World Rugby has Activate program, which you can access online. You could just put into Google Activate World Rugby and you will get the link. And under the link they have, it's age group separated and you can start the course. It's good for before you've started playing, and it can also be used as like pre-game warm-ups. So there's that player aspect, and as well in terms of for administrators or persons involved in rugby and putting on games and starting the league, there's the COVID-19 resources online that you can check, which can assist you in putting on tournaments or restarting the game of rugby when that's possible.
I would really like to thank you very much for coming on the program, because I think it was very informative what you have discussed, and I really, really hope that the viewers and those who will be hearing what you're saying will really take it to heart and implement some of the things that you spoke about. But I'm really thankful that you came on the program
Thank
today.
you for having me. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Maria, any closing?
Again, just thank you. It makes me feel really optimistic having someone of your caliber, someone that I have known, I've played with, I've been educated by. I'm so happy that we have you in Trinidad and Tobago as a resource. And yeah, we'll definitely have more conversations as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, viewers, we have come to the end of this edition of Scoreboard. And remember, there is a repeat tomorrow at 1 p.m. and also a repeat on Saturday at 2 p.m. Keep viewing this program. You don't know who we'll have next week. We're sure we'll have our co-host. We know that for sure. We're going to have the co-host on next week. So again, Maria, thank you very much. Doc, thank you again very much. And do have a blessed week ahead. Remember to sanitize, do everything is possible to stay safe, because we want to be here with you next week, Monday at 8 o'clock. So have a blessed week ahead.